each generation has had to defend, define, and expand what freedom truly means. We're going to have a very short presentation now. When I looked at the title of the first Heartstream, I thought, oh my gosh, are they going to highlight all of these virtues past and future of the United States? And so I was directed to use AI to look at what it considers the 12 most important defining moments in American history related to freedom, liberty, and truth. And we could have said justice. And so, Boyd, you can show that now. And I worked with Claude to tweak it a little bit because it had a couple in there that I didn't think were as important as some others. Obviously, the Declaration of Independence, which we celebrate 250 years in just a few days, was the founding assertion of unalienable rights to liberty that set America on a course to be what it is truly meant to be, a nation of light and an example for the world of a country and a people dedicated to this divine proposition that all men are created equal and that we have these unalienable rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Originally, it was said life, liberty, and property, and then it was changed. So sometimes I feel that we're only caretakers or stewards of the properties that we own because we don't really own them in perpetuity when we make our transition. And I think the native peoples understand that how can you really own the earth? And I believe this. I think we're only stewards and temporary proprietors of what we have in order to what? Glorify God and expand God's kingdom on earth. The next thing was the ratification of the Constitution, 1787 through 88. This was quite a work. It was not easy. It established the framework of self-governance and the rule of law for the United States that was a new experiment, and it used the wisdom of the Greeks and the Romans and what they learned and some of their scholars. And so our founding fathers and mothers did the best that they could do to perfect what became our Constitution, and I think it has served America very well. And many other countries have modeled their documents, their founding documents, or their constitutions on ours. Then the Bill of Rights itself, ratified in 1791, was super important. It enshrined free speech, the freedom of the press, religion, and due process. And of course, the other amendments that were brought forth over time were all part of this process of perfecting this experiment in liberty, justice, and freedom. The Louisiana Purchase was a very epic and important moment in our time when Thomas Jefferson worked on getting this gigantic portion of land to the west. It doubled the nation's property and opened the West to free settlement. And had that not been done, I don't know where we'd be exactly. Those of us in Montana probably wouldn't be part of this experiment. Whatever you think of the westward expansion and what it did to the native peoples, in terms of the divine plan for America that the Ascended Masters foresaw, this was absolutely essential, and it was an epic purchase and transaction that did indeed set us on course for the westward expansion. Next slide. So then the Civil War, of course, was a terrible time of division in the United States. Before it began, see, what were the years of the Civil War? Anybody know? 1860 to 1865? Okay. So Abraham Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation was absolutely a touchstone for true liberty for the African American people of that time who were slaves. Declared freedom for enslaved people in Confederate states. And then we see the war. However, after the war, the 13th Amendment was ratified, abolishing slavery nationwide. One of the most important things that have ever happened in our country. Then the 14th Amendment was ratified, guaranteeing citizenship, equal protection, and due process for all. The 19th Amendment, ratified in 1920, gave women the right to vote. I can't even imagine that they didn't have that right for so long, and yet that was the case. Imagine that. I mean, imagine being a woman in 1909 and not being able to vote. I mean, it's crazy. Yet it took that long for people to wake up and think, well, of course women are smart and they should be equally able to vote just like men. So I think it was quite a slight on women from the time of our founding until then, that they did not have the right to vote. And so on behalf of the Divine Mothers, I apologize for America being inept in that sense that they were ignorant to keep the right to vote from women until that year. Next slide. Then the four last events that I think are important. The Allied victory in World War II, preserving democratic freedom against totalitarian conquest through the Nazis and what the Japanese did, and even Italy. So a lot of effort was put into that war, a lot of time, energy, and the sweat, blood, and tears of Americans and many cultures. And I can't even imagine what would have happened if Nazism had won. We'd have a different world. In 1954, you all probably know about Brown versus the Board of Education, the Supreme Court ruling that struck down school segregation. So even after 1954, 2 years before I was born, there were still issues with this, and it didn't just immediately end and was perfected. I mean, we had a lot more going on even into the 60s. So in 64 and 5, both the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Acts were initiated and approved, outlawing discrimination and dismantling barriers to black voting rights. So I kind of grouped two things into one because I feel they are tied together. And I remember going to Birmingham, Alabama, and going into a museum there where it had the bus, the actual bus that the lady, what's her name? Rosa Clark, rode in and stood up for herself and for all black people. And it was quite an enlightenment. I felt a lot of light in that place. And I can feel it again just speaking about it. The courage of someone like her to do what she did was just fantastic. And then, of course, in 1989, the fall of the Berlin Wall, the global victory of liberty over communist authoritarianism. However, we know things are still not perfect, and there is authoritarianism even in the United States, as well as China and Russia and, of course, Iran, which is one of the worst, and what they've done to murder over 42,000 of their own people. So the final slide, a living promise. Each generation has had to defend, define, and expand what freedom truly means. So this is what I perceive as 12 epic events. There's, of course, many more, and you historians could summarize a lot more. We had Ken Mueller's recent class. We had Audrey Inn give his presentation, what was that, a couple years ago? And it was fantastic. So as historians, we understand the context of events that are outplayed in our life, in our personal countries and the world, yet it's part of a greater context of planetary freedom and liberation, which comes from a spiritual basis and foundation. So our purpose in our movement and community of light is to foster unity, oneness among all peoples, a new architecture of the spirit so that every man, woman, and child in all nations can experience the values, the precepts, the principles of freedom, liberty, and justice as we are supposed to experience it in the United States, even with what we may call the deep state's interference with this in our daily lives through over-taxation and other things and regulations. We're still perfecting it, right? We're still in the process of perfecting freedom, liberty and justice, and it probably will go on for quite some time.